Somewhere in Wales, buried under a mountain of garbage, there is a small metal hard drive. On that drive is a secret code, and that code unlocks a fortune worth more than $700 million. One man knows exactly where it's buried. He's spent over a decade trying to reach it, and he is never, ever getting it back. But here's the part that should make your skin crawl. That fortune didn't exist 20 years ago. Not in a bank, not in gold. Nowhere on earth. It was invented out of nothing by a person who may not even be real. His name was Satoshi Nakamoto. And Satoshi Nakamoto is a lie. Not the money. The money is terrifyingly real. The name, because the man who created the most valuable digital currency in human history, a currency now worth more than $1 trillion, was a ghost. No face, no voice, no photograph, not one. And to this day, nobody on the planet knows who he was. To understand how a hard drive in the trash became worth a fortune, you have to go back to the beginning, to a message from someone who was never seen again. October 2008. The world economy is on fire. Banks are collapsing. Governments are printing money by the trillions to save themselves. Ordinary people are watching their savings evaporate. And on a quiet email list for cryptography nerds, a 9-page document quietly appears. It's signed by a name nobody recognizes, Satoshi Nakamoto. The title is dry and forgettable. Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Almost everyone ignores it. They should not have ignored it, because hidden inside that boring little document was a weapon, a blueprint for money that no government could print, no bank could freeze, and no single human being could control. Money made of nothing but mathematics and trust. And on the 3rd of January 2009, Satoshi flipped the switch. He created the very first piece of Bitcoin. They call it the Genesis block. And inside it, buried in the raw code, in a place almost nobody would ever think to look, he left a hidden message. It was a newspaper headline from that exact day, a line about banks getting yet another government bailout. Think about what that means. It was a fingerprint, a timestamp, and a declaration of war, as if to say, this broken system is exactly why I built this thing. But who was I? That single question was about to torture the entire internet for the next 2 decades. A few days later, Satoshi sent the very first Bitcoin transaction to another programmer, a brilliant, well-liked coder named Hal Finney. Finney typed 2 now legendary words online: running Bitcoin. He had no idea he was standing at the birth of something that would reshape money itself. And here's where it gets strange. Years later, when the world became obsessed with unmasking Satoshi, many people pointed at Hal Finney himself. He happened to live in the same small town as a man whose name was literally Dorian Satoshi Nakamoto. The coincidence was almost too perfect. Finney denied it until the day he died. And he wasn't the only suspect. Over the years, brilliant cryptographers, forgotten programmers, even a man who loudly claimed to be Satoshi and was later branded a fraud in court, all of them circled this mystery. Journalists chased it. Documentaries hunted it. Governments reportedly investigated it. Every single one of them hit the same dead end. Because whoever Satoshi was, he was careful, impossibly careful. He scrubbed his tracks, hid his identity, and then, right as his creation started to matter, he did the one thing nobody saw coming. But we'll get to his disappearance. Because first, you need to understand just how worthless this thing started out. and how one hungry man turned that worthlessness into the most expensive mistake in history. In the beginning, Bitcoin was worth nothing. Literally nothing. A handful of programmers traded it back and forth like a toy. It had no price because nobody was buying it. To even guess what a single coin was worth, someone had to calculate the cost of the electricity used to create it. The answer came out to a fraction of a single cent, less than a penny per coin. And then came the 22nd of May 2010, a date that Bitcoin people now treat like a holiday. A programmer named Laszlo Hanyecz was hungry. He had thousands of these strange internet coins that were basically worthless. So he made an offer online. He would pay 10,000 Bitcoin to anyone who would send him 2 pizzas. Someone across the world took the deal, ordered the pizzas. Laszlo paid up. 10,000 Bitcoin gone for dinner. At the time, everyone thought it was wonderful, proof that this internet money could actually buy something in the real world. Nobody realized what had just happened. Because at Bitcoin's peak, those 2 pizzas would be worth over $1 billion. $1 billion for pizza. Sit with that for a second, and then ask the question that haunts every person who hears this story. What if he had just kept them? But before you feel too sorry for him, hold on. Because the road from a fraction of a cent to $1 billion pizza was not a smooth climb. It was a war. For years, Bitcoin lived in the underground, a currency for hackers, rebels, dreamers, and people the banking system had locked out. But slowly, quietly, the price began to move. From less than a penny to a single dollar, from $1 to 10. And every time it climbed, the world laughed harder. They called it a scam, a joke, a bubble seconds from bursting. Serious people went on television and promised it would collapse to zero any day now. It refused to collapse. $10 became $100. $100 became $1,000. And then disaster. Back then, most people bought and stored their Bitcoin on a single giant exchange called Mt. Gox. At one point, it handled the vast majority of all Bitcoin trades on Earth. People trusted it with everything. In 2014, it collapsed. Hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin, around 850,000 coins, simply vanished, hacked, stolen, gone. Overnight, thousands of people watched their fortunes disappear into thin air. Some were wiped out completely. It looked, for a moment, like the end of Bitcoin itself. The critics celebrated. This was it. Proof it was all a fantasy. And yet, Bitcoin did not die. It clawed its way back from the grave. $1,000, 10,000. And this is where it stops being funny. Because in October of 2025, Bitcoin touched a number that would have sounded completely insane to anyone reading that little 9-page document back in 2008. An all-time high, above $126,000 for a single coin, from a fraction of a cent to over $126,000. Now think very carefully about the people who were there at the start. The ones who bought while the whole world laughed at them. The ones who did the single hardest thing in this entire story. They just held on. There's a strange word in this world. HODL. HODL. It started as a mistake, someone panicking during a crash, drunk typing the word hold, and it became something close to a religion. A single commandment: do not sell. No matter how terrifying it gets. No matter how far it falls, never sell. The people who obey that word became some of the richest human beings alive. Look at the Winklevoss twins. You may know them as the brothers who once battled Mark Zuckerberg over the creation of Facebook. They took their money and did something everyone called insane. They poured millions into Bitcoin when it traded around $10 a coin. Within a few years, they were reported to be among the very first Bitcoin billionaires. But the famous names are not the wild part. The wild part is the people you will never hear about. Anonymous wallets, created in Bitcoin's earliest days, quietly holding tens of thousands of coins. Ordinary nobodies who spent a few $100s on a joke currency and woke up years later worth millions. Some of them barely remember doing it. And then there's the man who turned holding into an obsession bordering on madness. His name is Michael Saylor. He runs a company that started buying Bitcoin and simply would not stop. They spend their cash, then they borrow money to buy more. Then they raised billions of dollars for the sole purpose of buying more Bitcoin. Today, that single company holds over 800,000 coins, worth tens of billions of dollars. During the crashes, people said he was insane, that he'd destroy the whole company. He kept buying anyway. So by now, your brain is doing the thing everyone's brain does. You're thinking, I could have done that. Buy the joke money. Hold on. How hard could it possibly be? And that is exactly where this story turns into a nightmare. Because Bitcoin has a rule. A cold, merciless, unforgiving rule. There's no bank behind it. No customer service line. No manager to call. No forgot my password button waiting to rescue you. Every single Bitcoin is protected by a secret code called a private key. Lose that key, and your money is not stolen. It's not frozen. It is simply gone. Sealed inside a digital vault that no human, no government, no supercomputer that will ever exist can open. And people have lost that key in ways that will make your stomach turn. Which brings us back to that hard drive in Wales. His name is James Howells. In 2009, back when Bitcoin was worthless, he mined around 8,000 coins on his laptop just for fun, just to see if it worked. He saved the private key on a hard drive, tucked it in a drawer, and forgot it existed. In 2013, during a house cleanup, that hard drive got mistaken for junk, thrown in a trash bag, hauled to the Newport landfill, buried under the garbage of an entire city. By the time he understood what he lost, those 8,000 coins were worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So he begged the city for permission to dig. He offered to share the fortune with the entire town. He raised money. He assembled a team of engineers. He drew up detailed plans to search the landfill, inch by inch. The city said no. He took them to court. In 2025, a judge threw the case out, ruling that the instant that drive hit the landfill, it legally stopped being his. He appealed. He lost again. In desperation, he tried to buy the entire landfill outright. And then, after more than a decade of fighting, in the summer of 2025, he gave up. The fortune is still down there, right now. As you're hearing this, buried under 1.5 million tons of rotting garbage, and he will live the rest of his life knowing the exact spot and never being allowed to touch it. But as cruel as that is, at least James Howells knows where his key is. The next man isn't even given that mercy. Meet Stefan Thomas. He owns a small encrypted hard drive called an iron key. Locked inside it, more than 7,000 Bitcoin. At times, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. There's just one problem. He forgot the password. And the iron key was built with a brutal security feature, one designed to stop thieves. You get 10 guesses. 10. Enter the wrong password 10 times, and the drive locks itself forever. The contents become mathematically impossible to recover by anyone, ever. Stefan has already burned through most of his guesses. So now that little device just sits there. A massive fortune he legally, completely owns staring back at him from across the room, protected by a lock he himself built to keep it safe. And he cannot get in. He has tried everything. Experts, hackers, every trick imaginable. Nothing works. Imagine being that wealthy and that powerless at the exact same moment. And here's the truly disturbing part. These two men are not rare, because here is a fact that sounds impossible. Of all the Bitcoin that has ever existed, experts estimate that around 3.8 million coins are lost, permanently, gone, thrown away, forgotten, trapped behind dead passwords, locked in the wallets of people who died suddenly and never told a single soul the key. At Bitcoin's peak, that is hundreds of billions of dollars simply erased from existence. And here's the eerie thing. Those coins don't disappear from view. Everyone can still see them, frozen in place on the network, glittering, untouchable, ghost money, visible to all, reachable by no one. Which brings us to the largest, strangest, most valuable ghost of them all. Remember Satoshi, the inventor nobody could ever find? In 2010, right as his creation started to gain real value, Satoshi did the one thing nobody expected. He vanished. His messages slowed, then stopped. He quietly handed the project off to other developers and then walked into the darkness and was never seen or heard from again. But he did not leave empty-handed. Satoshi Nakamoto is believed to still control around 1 million Bitcoin, mined in the earliest days, when he was almost the only one running the machine, spread across thousands of separate wallets, and never moved, not once, not a single coin, in well over a decade. At today's prices, that dormant stash is worth roughly $70 billion, just sitting there, perfectly still, silent. Nobody knows if Satoshi is alive or dead. Nobody knows if he lost his keys too, just like the others. Nobody knows if he's out there right now, watching all of this unfold from the shadows. And here is the part that keeps traders up at night. If those coins ever moved, even one of them, it could send a violent shockwave through the entire global market, because it would mean the ghost had returned. But while the world holds its breath over a dead man's fortune, something else has been quietly happening. In boardrooms, in banks, in government buildings, the very people who once laughed at Bitcoin have started hoarding it. For years, the most powerful financial institutions on earth mocked it openly. They called it a fraud, a scam, rat poison, a fantasy for criminals and fools. Then, in 2024, they were finally allowed to sell it to the public in a simple, packaged form called an ETF. A way for any ordinary investor to own Bitcoin through a normal brokerage account, without ever touching the strange technology underneath. The floodgates exploded open. Today, those Wall Street funds together control more than 1.2 million Bitcoin. Stop and absorb that. These funds now hold more Bitcoin than Satoshi himself. The creator has been overtaken by the exact financial system he built this thing to escape. And it doesn't stop with Wall Street. Governments are in the game now too. Through years of seizures, busting hackers, dark web markets, and criminal empires, the United States government quietly piled up hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin. And in 2025, instead of auctioning it all off, it did something historic. It announced a strategic Bitcoin reserve, a national stockpile, an official decision to hold. Read that again. The same kind of government Satoshi built Bitcoin to defy is now stacking it inside its own vault. Corporations, Wall Street funds, entire nations, anonymous whales, and a faceless ghost sitting on a $70 billion grave. A tiny handful of players now control an enormous slice of every Bitcoin that will ever exist. And that phrase, that will ever exist, is the key to everything. Because there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. Ever. It's written directly into the code. It cannot be changed. Unlike dollars a government can print into oblivion, Bitcoin has a hard, permanent ceiling. And roughly every 4 years, the flow of new coins is automatically cut in half. Slower, rarer, harder to get. Now stack up everything you've heard. 1 million coins frozen in Satoshi's silent wallets. Nearly 4 million more lost in landfills and dead drives. Over 1 million locked inside Wall Street funds. Hundreds of thousands sealed in government reserves. And companies buying more every single week, swearing they'll never sell. The Bitcoin that's actually left the coins real people can still buy is shrinking fast. So could it happen again? Could it explode upward the way it once did, from a fraction of a cent? Be careful here. Nobody can predict that. Anyone who hands you a guaranteed number is lying. Bitcoin is savage. In 2026 alone, it fell hard from its record highs, vaporizing fortunes and testing everyone who swore they'd never sell. But the believers lay out a simple, chilling logic. If supply keeps shrinking and demand keeps climbing from Wall Street, from governments, from millions trying to escape inflation, then cold math takes the wheel. Less supply, more demand, price forced upward. The believers see a single coin worth a fortune. The skeptics see a bubble that has fooled the world for over a decade, about to burst for good and drag everyone's savings down with it. And the honest truth? Nobody standing here today knows which one is right. But there is one detail that keeps people staring at their screens late into the night. Somewhere out there, roughly 1 million coins sit frozen in the wallets of a man who never showed his face, who never spoke his real name, who built a $1 trillion machine and then vanished before the world understood what he'd done. Those coins have not moved in over a decade. And every single day, millions of people quietly watch those wallets, waiting, wondering. Because if they ever move, if a single coin from Satoshi's grave ever wakes up, it means the most powerful ghost in the history of money was never gone at all. He was just watching.